Kay and Mathews were living in a box. Okay, not a real box, but it sure felt like one. Their city apartment was small. It was so small that when Mathews stretched his arms, he could touch both walls. And, honestly, it was also a very dark apartment. There was only one window, and it looked directly at a brick wall. A very, very close brick wall. Not exactly the most inspiring view, right? They dreamed of a bigger space, a brighter space, somewhere they didn't have to take turns opening the refrigerator door. They wanted a home, not just a room to sleep in. And the noise, oh, the noise, it was constant. The apartment was on a busy street, so they heard sirens all night long. Their neighbors above them seemed to be training for a bowling competition every evening. Seriously, it was louder than my studio audience on a giveaway day. Kay would say, "Mathews, I can't hear myself think." And Mathews would reply, "What? I can't hear you over the sound of our neighbor dropping another bowling ball." They knew they needed a change. They wanted a quieter life, a more peaceful existence where the loudest sound was their own laughter. Their current place was also incredibly crowded. Every closet was overflowing, and their collection of books had formed small mountains on the floor. It was like living in a game of Tetris, except the blocks just kept falling. They wanted a home with more storage, a place where their belongings could actually breathe. A bigger kitchen was also on the list. Their current one was smaller than a phone booth. Cooking together was a carefully choreographed dance to avoid bumping into each other. It was less romantic and more dangerous. So, the decision was made. It was time to move. They sat down one evening, surrounded by the sounds of the city and their cramped belongings, and made a promise to each other. They would find their dream home. It had to be bigger, brighter, and definitely quieter than their current apartment. It needed to be a place where they could build a life, not just exist. Their adventure was just beginning, and they were filled with hope and excitement for what lay ahead. They were ready for something better. Their first stop was a modern studio apartment. It was very stylish, with shiny new floors and cool, industrial-looking lights. The realtor said, "It's the latest in urban chic," which, honestly, I think is just a fancy way of saying small. Kay looked at Mathews and said, "It's sleek." But they quickly realized it was even smaller than their current place. It was like they were looking at a dollhouse for very fashionable, very tiny people. There was no separate bedroom, just a corner for a bed. This was not going to work. Mathews walked from one end to the other in about 5 steps. "Kay," he said, "this place is definitely more modern, but it's much more cramped. Our old apartment is a palace compared to this." The kitchen was just a single counter with a small fridge. It was less of a kitchen and more of a suggestion of a kitchen. They thanked the realtor and left, feeling a little disappointed. A stylish home was nice, but a home where you can actually walk around is, better. The search continued. Next, they visited a beautiful condo on the 20th floor. Wow, this place was different. It was incredibly bright, with huge windows that showed off a stunning city view. The rooms felt so elegant and airy. "Now this is more like it," Kay exclaimed, twirling around in the spacious living room. It was much brighter and far more elegant than their dark little apartment. The kitchen was a dream, with marble countertops and brand new appliances. It was the kind of place you see in magazines. But then came the price tag. Oof. It was much, much more expensive than they had planned. Mathews did the math in his head. "Kay, this place is amazing, but it's also way more expensive than the studio. In fact, it's the most expensive place we've seen. They would have to eat instant noodles for the rest of their lives to afford it." As they stood on the balcony, feeling the wind, they knew this wasn't the one either. It was a beautiful dream, but it wasn't their dream. The perfect home had to be affordable too. Feeling a bit deflated, Kay and Mathews decided to look at a townhouse. On paper, it seemed perfect. It was much bigger than their apartment and the studio, and it was more affordable than the fancy condo. When they walked in, they were amazed by the space. "Look at all these rooms," Mathews shouted, his voice echoing a little. There was a living room, a dining room, and 3 whole bedrooms. It was the most spacious place they had seen all day. They could have a guest room, an office, and still have a room left over for, a dance party. They walked through the house, opening every door. The closets were huge. Their book mountains would finally have a home on some lovely empty shelves. "This is so much more spacious than our apartment," Kay said, smiling. "And it's way more comfortable than that tiny studio." They started to imagine their lives there. They could host dinners, have friends over, and not worry about everyone standing shoulder to shoulder. The idea was exciting, and for a moment, they thought they had found it. But then they opened a window. The townhouse was located right next to a busy school and a park. The sounds of children screaming, whistles blowing, and balls bouncing filled the air. It was a different kind of noise than their city apartment, but it was just as loud. Mathews said, closing the window. "It's certainly a more cheerful noise than sirens, but it's not exactly the peaceful life we were hoping for." It was noisier than the quiet condo, that was for sure. They sat on the stairs for a minute, thinking. The house was bigger, yes. It was more comfortable in terms of space. But was it the right atmosphere? "I think I'd feel like I live in a school playground," Kay admitted. The area was just too chaotic for them. They wanted a retreat, a calm space to come home to. This townhouse, as big as it was, didn't feel like a peaceful haven. With a sigh, they knew the search wasn't over yet. They were getting closer, but they weren't there. Their last appointment of the day was a bit of a drive. It was a house just outside the city, in a quiet suburban neighborhood. As they pulled up, they both got quiet. The house was beautiful. It had a lovely little garden in the front, and a big oak tree in the yard. It looked so peaceful. It was more charming than the modern studio, more welcoming than the cold condo, and looked much more peaceful than the chaotic townhouse. They felt a spark of real hope, the biggest one of the day. Inside, the house was perfect. It was incredibly spacious and filled with light from large windows that looked out onto green trees, not brick walls. "Mathews, look," Kay whispered. "It's so bright." The living room was cozy, with a beautiful fireplace. The kitchen was big and open, perfect for cooking together. It was bigger than their old apartment's kitchen, and it felt warmer and more inviting than the condo's sleek one. Every room felt just right. It was the most beautiful house they had seen. They walked from room to room, their excitement growing. "It's so quiet here," Mathews noted, standing by a window in the master bedroom. The only sound was the gentle chirping of birds. "This is the quietest place we've been to all day, and the neighborhood feels so much safer than our old one." They could picture themselves waking up to this peacefulness every morning. It was a world away from the constant sirens and the neighbors' bowling practice. This felt like home. "So," Kay said, turning to Mathews with a giant smile. "The studio was too small. The condo was too expensive. The townhouse was too noisy." Mathews finished her sentence. "And this house is just right." It was bigger, brighter, and infinitely more peaceful. It had the space of the townhouse but the elegance of the condo, all wrapped up in a package that was actually affordable. They looked at each other and they didn't even need to say it. They had found their dream home. Moving day was chaos, but the best kind of chaos. It was filled with boxes, laughter, and the excitement of a new start. As they unpacked, the house slowly started to feel like theirs. They put their book mountains onto beautiful new bookshelves. They hung pictures on the walls. Kay found the perfect spot for her favorite armchair right by the window, where she could read in the afternoon sun. It was a much more comfortable and brighter spot than anywhere in their old apartment. This house was already feeling happier. They spent the next few weeks decorating. They painted the bedroom a calm, peaceful blue. They bought a big, comfortable sofa for the living room, perfect for movie nights. The kitchen, once just a big, empty room, was now filled with the smells of their favorite meals. Cooking together was no longer a dangerous dance. It was fun. "I can't believe how much more space we have," Mathews said one evening, as they sat in their new backyard, watching the sunset. "This is so much better." Their new life was everything they had dreamed of. It was quieter, calmer, and more joyful. They slept better without the sound of sirens. They felt more relaxed without living in a cramped space. Their new home was bigger than the studio, more affordable than the condo, and more peaceful than the townhouse. It was the perfect combination of everything they wanted. It was spacious, bright, elegant, comfortable, and most importantly, it was theirs. They weren't just living in a space, they were building a life. And that's the story of how Kay and Mathews found their happy place. It shows that finding the perfect home is a journey, but it's worth it. Their new house was the best choice because it was bigger, brighter, more peaceful, and just felt right. So, if you enjoyed this story and want more fun ways to learn English, be sure to subscribe to my channel and share this with someone who is dreaming of their own perfect home. We'll see you next time. Be kind to one another.